this is a little bit of a stretch, but I'm curious to hear where you would go with this. Many of the people who have written books that we study today as part of the canon of how thought developed over time, they weren't just intellectuals. Many of them were also doing things. Do you think there's also an element of, like, sometimes the best way to explore philosophical ideas is not just that there's no room for you in the ivory tower, it's that grappling with things hands-on is actually a application of chasing this curiosity?
A lot of great things in that question to get into. One of them is, if you, and this is an argument I have with conservatives. So sometimes conservatives are upset that I criticize the university because to them, this is like the storehouse of wisdom and knowledge. And how is the next generation going to have access to it if we shut down Harvard? My God,
The internet.
what would happen? Right. And one of the things that bothers me is they don't like the canon that they believe in of great novels and plays and poems was by and large written by people who never went to college at all. Either because it wasn't a dominant part of the culture, or it just wasn't necessary, or they were out there living their lives. And so that isn't like, why are conservatives interested in passing on the canon without thinking about how this canon was produced in the first place? Do they just think it was random that these great works popped up like popcorn out of nowhere? Or was there something else about the types of people in culture that lent themselves to the writing of great books? I'm more interested in that second question. I would love to see, I don't think all the great books have been written or all the great philosophical arguments have been settled. So I would love to see more of that. And so sometime in the 20th century, you look at the professionalization of writing. You see it even in journalism, where journalism schools start to emerge. The great journalists of the early 20th century had no college degrees. H.L. Mencken, people like that. He's one of the great American prose stylists of all time, hilarious. And this man was self-educated. And then you get to the 60s and 70s, and suddenly it's like people are going to journalism school. But probably the worst offender of all is the MFA, which has become the standard bearer of any serious literary fiction author. And I just think it's homogenized the view and the style of all these people. I don't think it's led to great poems or great books. And so, it does beg the question, is like, maybe not only are they being indoctrinated into a certain attitude and set of philosophical views, mainly political views, but they're also not living interesting lives. And so when I think it was Melville said his Harvard and Yale was the whaling ship, and has to be the case that he was inspired by that, right, to write Moby Dick. That's like pretty straightforward.
I do think there's something to, I mean, this is tangential, but I'll gripe about this a lot, that when you're in school, you're primarily being taught by people who've done nothing else besides be in school for, since they're 5 or 6 years old. And I think that's true for a lot of different arenas. I mean, I didn't get into the startup world in my early 20s because I wanted to work in startups forever. I got into it because I wanted to do interesting things, so I'd have some context to have good ideas and write. Like, that's really what I wanted to do, is play with ideas, not startups. But I needed some experience first, and I was well aware of that. So I think the point you're making is really interesting, because I think there's something to that. There's a limit to what you can get inside the walls of an academy to help you understand what happens outside of the academy without actually going out into this theoretical world that you are studying through papers and lectures, and you have to grapple with it.
Unless you have some ideal for the purely theoretical life, I can't imagine why sitting in an armchair in an ivory tower would be good. If like a classic debate between action versus contemplation, one way to frame it is like, these things should not be substitutes for the other, and they can go wrong one way or the other. It's like, thought should not be a substitute for action, meaning, navel gazing, refusing to make a decision, much like Hamlet. I think in that case, thought is a negative thing. And then likewise, action. It's like we shouldn't just be rash because we can't come up with the better idea. So it's like somehow you have to hit the golden mean of like doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason, and like balancing thought and action. And to me, I honestly don't think you can know the world like you're saying is like, Socrates famously said, know thyself, or at least he was told that from an oracle, and took it on as his own imperative. But one of the things about knowing yourself is like, you can't possibly sit in an armchair and truly know what you're capable of by just sitting there. It's only by exploring the world and hitting obstacles and overcoming challenges that you can truly discover what you're capable of. And therefore, if you aren't out in the world doing those things, then in some sense, you can't even truly know yourself at all. So the true philosophy is actually to leave the armchair behind and explore.
In the inverse, do you think it is beneficial, even if you're hungry to go out in the world and test yourself and build something and solve a problem in a very tangible sense? Do you think it's still, I hate to make broad generalizations that apply to everyone, but in a general sense, do you think it's beneficial to also take time to study philosophy and the liberal arts more broadly? Do you think that this is sort of just happens to be a proclivity of a lot of people who also want to go out and build things, and it just is a personality trait, and that's just how these people are wired? Or do you think it's actually beneficial, if you want to build things, to make an effort to study some of this stuff?
I think so. I mean, it's funny, is like, to come back to that point about ethics and aesthetics. I wish we did know more about how to understand what's good and what's beautiful. And so I think to create great products and services, or to, undertake incredible projects, I think we need some receptivity to the beautiful and the good, in order to design these things. So I don't know. I wish studying the liberal arts lent itself to, let's say, refining that receptivity to beauty. I'm not quite sure how that works, because it doesn't seem to work that well as in higher ed as we know it. But that should be the aim. I mean, it's the marketing material that people believe in. So it's also true. I think that's why people want to study great Russian novels, because they represent the best of the genre. And so trying to understand what makes a great novel great will also aid you in coming up with your idea about, the car you're going to build or the spaceship you're going to fly. I think that's true. But the good and the beautiful are very elusive subjects, and so you can't, again, like, studying them theoretically can't be a substitute for actually trying to create them. At some point, you have to take action, but maybe we just do the best we can.